Now let's consider another aspect of this commandment that it might not be just immediately obvious to us today, right here on the surface of this, but it was very much a reality in the lives of the Israelites who first heard these commandments. And so in the ancient Near East, it was common for people to use divine names in magical rituals or incantations, all those kind of things. Basically, though, they believed that if they knew a God's name, then that would give them power over that God. And so the concept of quote unquote, I guess we'll call it name magic, it was widespread in the ancient world. In fact, in Egyptian mythology, the goddess Isis, we can read, she gained power over the sun god Ra by actually learning his secret name. And in Mesopotamian texts, we find these really just kind of elaborate rituals that involve invoking the names of various deities to achieve certain ends, basically trying to manipulate these quote-unquote false gods. And so Israel's neighbors, they often invoked their gods' names to try to manipulate them into doing what they wanted. So it was basically like a form of spiritual arm twisting. Right, like so in Canaan, the land of Canaan, for example, we might hear these phrases if we could go back in time of people saying like, "Oh, great Baal, if you really are the almighty storm god, then send rain onto our crops." And see, this practice, it was not just about prayer or supplication, but rather it was about trying to control the divine through the power of their name. And we see echoes of this in the Bible, though every time we do, it's always in a negative light. I mean, think about the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. So they're calling out the name of their God. We read in 1 Kings 18:26. They're calling out the name of their God from morning until noon. Or we see the common practice of swearing oaths by the names of certain gods, which the Israelites, they were just absolutely forbidden to do this. We see that in Joshua 23, verse 7. And while this might seem foreign to us, or this kind of trying to control gods by knowing their name, it can easily seem foreign. But the question is it really? I don't think that we're as far removed from this kind of mindset as we might like to think that we are. I mean, how often do we hear people say things like this? Like, God, if you're really there, then prove it by doing X, Y, or Z, fill in the blank. And this is remarkably similar to the practice of trying to manipulate these false gods, the divine though, through challenges or tests or things like that, just by knowing their name. Or maybe consider the so-called prosperity gospel, that it promises wealth and health and success if you have just enough faith or say just the right phrases in the right way. It walks a really fine line of faith, which is wonderful, and on the other side though, being a modern form of name magic. See, the idea that if we say just the right words, or in quotes, performing just the right rituals, we can compel God to act on our behalf. And we can see an example of this kind of quote-unquote name magic, this thought of this in the New Testament, in Acts chapter 19 specifically. In Acts 19, what we see is there's some Jewish exorcists, and what they tried to do is they tried to cast out evil spirits by saying, in the name of Jesus, whom Paul preaches, I command you to come out. Now, what they were trying to do is use Jesus' name basically like a magical formula without any real relationship with him. And at the end of the day, it didn't end all that well for them. The evil spirit overpowered them, and they fled naked and wounded. And so this story, though, of them using Jesus' name just because they heard it. Notice, there wasn't a relationship there. It was the Jesus whom Paul preaches. But this story, it's a powerful illustration of the difference between true spiritual authority and mere just magical manipulation. So the sons of Sceva, that's the Jewish exorcists in that story, they knew the name of Jesus, like I said, but they didn't know Jesus. Right? They tried to use his name as a tool or as a weapon, without understanding that true spiritual power comes from relationship and submission to God. See, this is another area where the third commandment, it reminds us that God's name, it's not a tool for us to use for our own purposes. In fact, I'll put it this way. We don't manipulate God, we submit to him. We don't command him, we petition him. We don't use his name to get what we want. We use it to glorify him and to align ourselves with his will. And so just beyond how we carry ourselves, the words that we say, the actions that we take, this commandment challenges us to examine something else. Our prayer life. Are we approaching God with reverence and with submission? Or are we trying to twist his arm? Are we seeking his will, or are we just using religious language and jargon to kind of just justify our own desires?